Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday, finally. Um, so, this is our kind of last week of class. So, I'll remind you, of course, that next week we're going to start with presentations Tuesday morning. So, again, just as a reminder, you need to be ready to go on Tuesday morning because I'll just be drawing names. And if you're not ready to go, then I'm going to give you a 0, okay? Because we can't wait. So you've got to be ready for Tuesday morning. Secondly, if you are an in-class person, you need to get your presentation to me ahead of time so that I can call it up on the computer and put it on the screen, okay? So maybe the best way to do this is to Teams message me and attach it to the Teams message. That might be the easiest way to get it to me, because sometimes the PowerPoints are too big for email and they won't go through. So you can try that. Again, if you're online, you can keep it because we'll be on a Zoom call and and you'll be able to kind of share your screen, and so we can see your slides that way. Let me see. I'll put all that in a Teams message a little bit later today, just so we have it, just so everybody has it to refer to. But yeah, that's next week. So be ready for that and good luck. Yeah. So let's see who's here. So Sean is here. Good morning, Sean. Simran is here. Good morning, Simran. Reza's here. Good morning, Reza. Basil's here. Good morning, Basil. Zartaj is here. Good morning, Zartaj. Basil is here. Good morning, Basil. And Malika's here. Good morning, Malika. Okay, so yesterday we had just finished watching that TED Talk by Richard Wilkinson, right? And you'll recall that the main point of his talk was that as societies get more and more unequal within the society, as things get more and more unequal, it seems that we have more social problems and all kinds of different social problems, right? In terms of social outcomes and educational outcomes and mental health issues, kids dropping out of school, teenage pregnancies, obesity, drug and alcohol addiction, homicide and violence. All of these things kind of get worse as society gets more and more unequal, right? And he makes some suggestions about what that might be due to. I think there's probably a lot of different factors that are connected to why we see more negative outcomes. Good morning, Nicole. Why we see more negative outcomes in societies that are more unequal. I think there's more to it. But he does suggest that there is added stress and the added physiological stress and emotional stress in being kind of looked down on, right? Or feeling like you are less than other people, right? Good morning, Hamad. So again, that might be part of it. I don't think that's the whole story, but his data is interesting, right? And it does show us that the more unequal we get, the more kind of problems we have. And so he suggests some tax remedies for that, right? We can tax people at a different rate in order to create more equality within society where maybe there isn't one, right? Yeah, so this is just a summary of what his talk said, that that it is about that inequality within a society is what makes the difference, right? And so this was his graph, of course, where he sort of showed that trend, and we saw this kind of line show up over and over again, right? As things became more unequal, more social problems kind of resulted from that, right? So I'll just go through these. This is some of the things he said. We saw that. We talked about this yesterday, this idea of social evaluative threat, right? Where people are stressed by being kind of judged or looked down on, right? And here again, how can it be remedied? Well, with salaries maybe that are aligned more to the market, like in Japan, or governments can use taxation, right? More taxes for people who make more money, lower taxes for people who make less, and you know, Sweden and Norway and Denmark are countries that already do that to a, you know, to good effect. Okay, so that kind of ties up classism for us. And so, again, as a very quick summary, we said classism is an oppression of poor and working class people by those who control necessary resources. And usually we're talking about people closer to the top of the economic ladder, people who are in the owning class, people who have generational wealth, right? They inherit wealth from their parents or grandparents, and so they don't really need to work jobs. People who own investments and companies and things like that. That's kind of the dominant group in this case, and they are the existing system is kind of held in place by the idea that everyone is an individual and everyone's success is directly connected to how hard they work, right? And again, that's not entirely true, right? It's partially true. You know, if you want to succeed in life, yeah, you do have to work, and sometimes you have to work hard, but there are other factors involved, and particularly there are other factors that keep people who are already wealthy, keep them wealthy, and make it much more difficult for people at the bottom of the ladder to earn wealth or to kind of increase their financial position, right? And so even though we can, you know, in some ways we can feel good because in terms of economy, the global population is better off than they were 20 or 30 years ago. And so the quality of life for the entire world has moved up. But that said, people at the bottom have moved up a little bit, and people at the top have moved up a lot, right? And so the 1% are far richer than they've ever been before. And even though the poor are a little bit better off, still not so much, right? The other thing we see is that in countries like the United States, the middle class, the people who used to be able to make a decent living, you know, working manufacturing jobs and so on, they're starting to disappear, right? And they're starting to slide down into lower paying or less skilled jobs. And so that's more difficult. And so again, that's part of the inequality we see in American society, right? That middle class is being hollowed out, right? Their jobs are disappearing and people are sliding down, creating more inequality, right? Because there's fewer people in the middle. And so we have these kind of massive companies and very rich people, and again, they have a lot of money, they have a lot of power, and they're able to sort of lobby the government for things that they want, right? Particularly lower taxes, and they're often successful in that. Again, there's these ideologies that hold classism in place. You know, the idea is, you know, anyone who wants a job can get one. And it's true, but it's not so much can you get a job, but can you get a job that actually pays you a living wage, right? Can you actually get a job that will put you above the poverty line? And for lots of people in the US and even in Canada, sometimes that answer is no, right? And that's alarming, right? People need to be able to support themselves, and jobs that don't pay that, well, that's a problem, right? If you look at some of the stats, and I've kind of pointed you in the direction of statistics the last couple of units here in social justice, but 59% of workers are paid hourly, okay? And 2.6 million of those make less than minimum wage, right? So there's a huge population of the United States that is being paid by the hour and just kind of struggling to get by. And again, the problem with being paid by the hour is that if you are sick or if you are injured, it means you can't work. And if you can't work, then you can't earn money. And if you don't have any benefits, and if you don't have any savings, then, you know, a sickness or an injury can really, you know, put you in financial trouble, right? And can have serious effects on your life, right? So that's alarming that so many people are kind of right on the edge, right? And if anything goes wrong, they're going to be in real financial trouble. Again, the middle class that is assumed to be the majority is not so much anymore. The middle class is kind of disappearing, and there's sort of a working poor that is replacing them. And again, efforts to raise minimum wages by the US are commonly defeated, although I think it was just last month, US Congress did finally pass an increase to minimum wage. But for the longest time, Congress did not increase the legal minimum wage. And again, it might be worth pointing out that the people who continually say no to increasing minimum wage are wealthy people, right? Most of the people in Congress earn, at least $200,000 a year. A lot of them are millionaires, right? And so it's worth kind of thinking about, not only the fact that the US government is saying no, but who's representative? Good morning. Who's representative in those governments, right? So in Canada, we have a slightly different situation. Sorry, we have a slightly different situation because the minimum wage is not set by the federal government, it's set by provincial governments. And again, in the US or in Canada, about 6.7% of workers earn minimum wage. Okay, so that's alarming, right? That's more than in the US. And again, most of them, not by a huge majority, but still more women make minimum wage than men do. Right? Again, most minimum wage workers work very hard, right? You're using your body as part of your employment, right? And so you're on your feet all day, or you're running around, or you're moving things, and they're physically tiring. Sometimes you can be physically injured, and some people need to work more than one of these jobs just to be able to stay above the poverty line, right? And so again, it's people who are at that level cannot really build any wealth, cannot generate any savings, and so they're kind of always vulnerable to an injury or a sickness, or they or they just can't climb the ladder, right? They just can't move up in society. And so yeah, people living in poverty are often victims of the system, right? They're victims of a system where the rich and the wealthy are able to create a society that works for them and kind of exploits the people at the bottom, right? And the people at the bottom are not able to change their situation or move up, right? And even though that might be unfair or tragic or difficult for the people at the bottom, what Richard Wilkinson showed us is that it doesn't really, it affects everyone, right? Whether you're at the bottom of the economic ladder or the top of the economic ladder, you are negatively affected by living in a society that is more unequal, right? Okay, so I think that's all I have on classism, so I'm going to leave it there. I have a very quick summary for you. I have a very quick, good morning, Awais. I have a very quick summary for you, and so maybe I'll just walk you through that now, kind of as a way to tie up what we've talked about in this course, okay? So one of the things I'm trying to sort of hammer home here, at least in the last part of the course, is that inequality hurts everyone, right? And so Richard Wilkinson showed us that that social problems, all these different kinds of social problems, get worse when you have greater inequality in society. And of course, Richard Wilkinson was talking about economic inequality, right? He was talking about whether people had lots of money or little money. But we've talked about all kinds of other inequality in this class as well, right? We've talked about sexism and racism and ableism and all of these different things, right? All of these different ways in which people can be unequal. And so one of the questions that people often ask, or that people are confused about, is that they don't actually see the inequality, right? They look out at their world and they say, oh yeah, it seems like everyone's equal, right? Everyone's just walking around, living their life. I don't see any inequality here. But again, it's the broad numbers, right? It's the statistics that are society-wide that can help illuminate what's really going on, right? And so when we look at life expectancy, when we look at people's educational outcomes, when we look at their net wealth or overall income, or what percentage of the population is in prison, when we look at those numbers for all of society, that's when we can start to see patterns, right? That's when we can start to see that, oh, this group is, underrepresented and this group is overrepresented, right? And it can lead us to ask questions about what's going on, right? For instance, why are Indigenous people 3% of Canada's population, but in the prison system, they make up 20 or 25% of people in prison? Why is that, right? It's a big difference, right? If all things were equal, you would expect that if there's 3% of Canadians are Indigenous, 3% of the people in jail would be Indigenous too, more or less. But we see a big difference there, right? And that can lead us to ask, why is that? What's going on, right? Why do these inequalities exist? Well, we've talked about this as well, right? We've said that societies are built with social institutions, right? Education, the government, religion, the criminal justice system, the family, all of these things are kind of little units of society that are working together, right? And so those institutions try to meet society's needs, right? They try to do something that society needs them to do, but also they reproduce society as it already is, right? That's often the job of most or all of these institutions, is to reproduce society as it is. And in the process of doing that, they impose their prejudices on society, right? So if you have, an education system that favors white people or that favors men or males, then that prejudice is going to be projected onto society, right? People are going to learn things in a sexist or a racist way, right? And then they're going to go out into society and continue that pattern, right? And so these social institutions, good morning, have been around for a long time, and they continue to reinforce their prejudices on society, right? We know that the social institutions are usually controlled by dominant groups, right? And so the prejudices that are built into those institutions come from the dominant group, right? And usually there's a historical reason for why the dominant group is in power, and a historical reason for the prejudices that they hold, right? And so sometimes it's the development of agriculture, sometimes it's colonialism, sometimes it's civil wars, sometimes it has to do with religion. All of these things can influence what a dominant group believes, right? And again, when they gain power, they will start to use social institutions to create society in a way that benefits them. So, how do dominant groups benefit from their control of social institutions? Well, again, because they control social institutions, they are able to access resources and opportunities that others simply don't have, right? And so we talked about that with women's suffrage, right? When women didn't have the right to vote or run for office in Canada prior to maybe about 1920 or so. And because of that, well, the reason they didn't have it is because men denied them that right? And because of that, men were able to advance their own interests, right? Women had a hard time advancing their interests because they didn't have any political power, right? They had no representation. They couldn't run for office. They couldn't vote in a woman even if they tried, because they couldn't vote. And so they were kind of denied access to power and to the ability to kind of make their lives better, right? And so dominant groups sometimes monopolize this ability to access power. And again, they create social institutions and society according to their own prejudices, right? According to their own beliefs. And so, Canada is the way it is because, white males made it this way, right? And again, not everything about Canada is bad, right? Canada is a great country. There's lots of great things about it, but it's not a perfect country, right? And so we have to be able to see those, things that are unequal or, that marginalize people and fix them, right? That's the job here. And we said dominant groups are constantly kind of imposing their prejudice on society, and their prejudices come from their own socialization, right? Everyone holds certain stereotypes and prejudices against different people and different situations, and the dominant group can, and if they're not careful, the dominant group will impose those on society, right? And again, whether it's anti-Semitic views, whether it's Islamophobia, I don't really like the term Islamophobia, but whatever, Islamophobia, whether it's misogyny, whether it's homophobia, I don't really like that term either, but regardless, whatever those prejudices are, those will be kind of projected onto society, right? And society will be built with those kind of beliefs in mind, right? And so, where do these things come from? Well, they come from socialization, right? Where do prejudices and stereotypes come from? We learn them, right? We learn them from our parents sometimes. We learn them from people around us. We learn them from our friends, our teachers. Sometimes we learn them from media, right? Television or music or movies. Sometimes we just learn them by kind of being out in society and being exposed to other people, right? And so we learn them, right, through socialization. And we spent a lot of time talking about socialization earlier. We said that many of these stereotypes and prejudices are not taught explicitly, but they're implicit, right? Nobody sort of tells you exactly what the prejudices are, but you just kind of absorb them, right, and learn them. Remember when we were watching that documentary, Eighth Fire, about Indigenous people? And toward the end of the documentary, there was an Indigenous man that was teaching at a college in Manitoba, right? He was teaching an Indigenous culture class. And the people in his class were recent immigrants to Canada, right? We remember seeing them, right? They're from all around the world. And I forget, one of the students said, I had these negative views about Indigenous people, but now I've learned, I've learned kind of what the real story is. And so it's interesting, even after being in Canada for just a short time, those people had absorbed those prejudices and stereotypes that some of the population holds, right? So it doesn't really take long for those ideas to be learned. And I'm sure that those students, those recent immigrants to Canada, I'm sure they didn't go searching out prejudice, right? And I'm sure nobody sat them down and said, okay, here's what you need to know about, here's all the stereotypes and prejudices you need to know to live in Canada. Nobody did that. They just absorbed them, right? They just kind of learned them accidentally. And so, again, we kind of pick up some of these ideas like a computer picks up a virus, right? We don't know where it came from. It's just there. It's running in the background. We don't really know what it's doing, but we pick these things up, right? So what do we do? Well, remember this, right? Remember that knowledge is socially constructed, right? Most of the things that humans do and know and believe are things that we've just kind of made up, right? We've just kind of agreed them to be true, right? And some of it has to do with behavior, right? Social norms. Some of it has to do with ideas about the way we think society works or the way we should live our lives, or what's right and what's wrong. All of these things are things that we've just decided on, right? And good morning. And so, since we've constructed knowledge, right, since we've just kind of agreed that certain things are true, well, we can reconstruct it, right? We can agree that other things are true. That's the beauty, right? Gravity is not socially constructed, right? If I drop this, it will fall, right? So there's no way to reconstruct that knowledge, but other things we can reconstruct, right? Our beliefs, our values, our social norms, right? And so how do we reconstruct our knowledge? Well, we do all of these things, right? All of these things that that I introduced you to right at the beginning of the course, right? Strive for intellectual humility, right? Know that we don't know everything, and we don't. I don't. Recognize the difference between informed knowledge and opinion, right? Lots of people have opinions about things, but they're not backed up by very much, right? And so what we really need to pay attention to, everyone's allowed to have an opinion, of course, but just because you have an opinion doesn't mean anyone else should really pay attention to it or believe it, right? If you want someone to believe you, or if you want to believe someone else, they should be able to give you an argument, right? They should be able to support their belief with good quality premises and evidence, right? This is why I believe that you should all drink coffee, right? Here are my reasons, 1, 2, 3, right? Opinions are fine and everyone can have them. I have my opinions, but they just don't mean much, right? and we shouldn't treat them the same as, well thought out arguments, right? They're not the same thing. Let go of your personal anecdotal evidence and again look at broader social patterns. So we all have experience with different people in society. Sometimes that informs our prejudice, sometimes it doesn't. But we really need to look at the numbers, right? To know what's happening with society as a whole, okay? Notice if you have any defensive reactions. I don't know if anyone had any upset feelings during this course. Nobody kind of let me know about that. But if you did, pay attention that that's often a point where you can reflect and think about what's going on for you, right? Sometimes people have a reaction because they're bumping into something that they previously believed to be true, right? Part of their socialization. And then sometimes when they hear information that conflicts with that, they get upset, right? And again, the more deeply held that idea is, the more upset they get, right? But again, it's a good opportunity to say, well, okay, why am I feeling this way, right? What belief is this bumping into that is upsetting me, right? And again, maybe it's a belief that you need to look at, right? And see if it's actually serving you and if you should continue to believe it, right? And maybe you should, right? And also maybe you shouldn't, but it's a good kind of flag to pay attention to why you're feeling the way you are, right? And again, we need to recognize that our positionality informs our experience of the world, right? And so again, walking down the street in Vancouver as me, a white man, is not the same as walking down that same street as an Asian man, or a black man, or a black woman, or a Muslim woman, or a person in a wheelchair, right? It's not the same, right? It's not the same experience. People don't look at me and treat me the same as they do everyone else, right? And so everyone walking down the street is having just a slightly different experience of what's happening, right? And so we have to be aware of that, right? We have to be aware of the idea that we don't see everything all of the time, right? We can only see things from our own perspective. And so we need other perspectives to inform that. So if we can do all those things, then I think we might actually kind of be on the road to achieving some kind of social justice, right? If we can recognize inequality when we see it, if we can understand where the inequality comes from, if we can challenge our own socialization and our own prejudices and our own stereotypes, then I think we can actually make some progress here, right? We can actually fix things. And again, remember, that's what we said at the very beginning, right? Is that if we believe in social justice, or if we feel that social justice is important, it means that we believe that all people in society deserve access to the same resources, okay? So we're not talking about perfect equality, right? We're never going to be perfectly equal. All of us are different and unique in our own ways, right? We don't want people that are all the same, but we do want people to have equal opportunities, right? We want people to be able to access the resources they need and have the opportunity to do the things that they want to do, right? If we believe in social justice, we embrace human rights, right? And we understand that all citizens are of equal worth, right? And they have the right to be able to meet their basic needs and to kind of gain opportunities and live their lives in, a similar way to anyone else. Right? And again, we know there's inequality in society. So if we believe in social justice, then we want to reduce those inequalities. Right? Again, we can't make everyone perfectly equal, and I don't think we should. I don't think that's a good idea. But there are inequalities that we can address, right? And I think that all of us in this course have probably seen things that we learned about, and we said, yeah, that's not right, right? We don't want a situation where people are experiencing religious oppression. Right? We don't want situations where people cannot get married if they want to, right? We don't want situations in which people are denied access to places or are subjected to racism or violence because of the color of their skin, right? Or because of their gender, right? I think we can agree that we don't want that, right? And so we can work to fix that, right? We can work to reduce those inequalities. And I think the bottom line here is that, of all the different types of oppression we've seen, sexism and racism and heterosexism and religious oppression and classism, ableism, all of those things kind of worked the same way, right? They all had to do with dominant groups and minoritized groups. They all had to do with stereotypes and discrimination. They all had to do with power, right? Who had power and who didn't. And so in some ways it doesn't really matter much whether we're talking about racism or sexism or whatever. If you kind of look under the hood at the machinery, they all work the same way, right? Every form of oppression works the same way. It's just that the groups are different and the stereotypes are different. And so yeah, all these forms of oppression kind of work the same way. And I think this is, again, the bottom line, right? Even if you see this social justice stuff and you're like, ugh, I don't care, maybe this is worth remembering, right? Is that if you are in a society with a lot of inequality, everyone gets hurt, right? Everyone is at a disadvantage because of it. Even people who are in the dominant group or people who are closer to the top, you will still suffer the effects of greater inequality, right? And so it's worth fixing, right? Even if not for others, for ourselves, right? We will enjoy a better quality of life and a better society for everyone, even dominant group members, if we try to repair this inequality. Okay? So, that said, are there any questions? Are there any questions? No? Okay, well, I think that's all the social justice I have. I don't think I have any more. No, there's none in there. But that's all the social justice I have for you. So, what I will do then is I will end it there. If you want to keep working on your presentation, I can answer questions for you. But otherwise, yeah, that's all of the social justice I have. Okay, so yeah, I'll end class here, but I'll still be available on Teams if you want to ask me a question. I can respond. People in the classroom here, if you want to sit and keep working, you can. If you want to go and work somewhere else or do something else, you can too. But that's all I have for you. Okay. Good morning. So I'll leave it there, online people. I'll leave it there, and yeah, if I don't hear from you in questions, then I'll see you first thing Tuesday morning. Okay. So that is it. Goodbye.